One of the things that I have on a Post-it in front of my laptop screen is a very brief one by Rumi that says, our task is not to seek for love, but to seek and find all the barriers that we built against it. And I share that because I think it's really the same thrust that we're trying to explore here with empathy. And our task is not to seek for empathy, but to search and find all the barriers that we built up against it. I hope that that makes sense as I share with you what I've sort of come to understand through my own work and work of so many brilliant thinkers and scientists around the world that's helped us understand what empathy is, right? A lot of us, everybody kind of understands at some level in their own right what they think empathy is. A lot of people have programs that are espousing the goodness of empathy, and then you might hear that, oh, there's something called empathic distress, something called empathic concern, there's something called sympathy, there's something called pity, there's something called compassion. All of these terms are strangely interwoven and interconnected, but also separate from each other, and I hope to offer some clarity there. The early work on empathy was done by Dan Batson and Nancy Eisenberg, and basically they were looking at kids and showing them videos of other people who were suffering, and looking at how they responded, what happened in their bodies, what did they say the experience was like, and they carved out two different territories of empathy, empathic distress and empathic concern. Kids who fell into the category of empathic distress tended to try to escape the situation. They just wanted to stop watching. They wanted to move away from the situation that they found themselves in, and those who experienced and reported empathic concern showed a different physiological profile and wanted to help. And this was kind of the genesis of the study of what empathy is, where it comes from, and what it means. Now, when we sort of carve out that space, empathy gets broken into two main buckets. The first one we're all kind of familiar with because Barbara talked about it a lot in our last presentation. She talked about this phenomenon of positivity resonance, and that's a part of empathy. And that's one thing that's really important to keep in mind about empathy, that empathy is not just about negative states. Oftentimes people think, oh, I'm empathic for your pain or I'm empathic for your suffering. But actually, empathy encompasses what Barb spoke about, which is positivity. When we laugh because we enter a room of people who are all hysterically laughing, that's empathy. When we're 25% more likely to yawn because a person near us yawned, that's empathy. Right? And that falls into this, again, this category of what we call affective empathy. That's experiencing something in our own bodies that is a response to the perception or even thinking about another person's expression or experience. And there's this other category, which is cognitive empathy. This is recognizing emotions. So when you're going to the Greater Good Science Center and maybe taking our emotional intelligence quiz, there's all these different facial expressions. It's another term that gets all intermixed with the space. And empathy is your ability to really understand what those faces mean and why people might be experiencing them. Recognizing other people's emotions, what they mean, and why they might be having them is what we mean by cognitive empathy. So where does affective empathy come from? Barb shared a lot about this, so I get to sort of speed through this kind of quickly. There's a lot of different terms she used that are also listed here. So some call it mirroring, right? This is when your face or your body automatically does what somebody else's body's doing. If somebody else starts tapping on a table, you're more likely to start doing that too. Somebody starts rubbing their face, you're more likely to do that too. If you're taking a yoga class, there's a reason the yoga teacher gets up and shows you with her body or his body what the physical configuration is, because you can do that more easily than if they simply just uttered it through language. I've been in situations where they utter it through language and you're like, what? I can't do it. You got to show me, right? We're built to try to simulate and mirror and resonate on multiple levels. This recent study by Pavel Goldstein is a great one, where they had couples come into the lab, one person's getting shocked, one person gets to support that person. They get to hold their hands in a supportive way. And it turns out the more their brains show this pattern of neural synchrony, the more empathy the person who's giving support reports feeling, and the less pain the person experiencing the shock feels. So empathy has this formative role in guiding us to understand other people by feeling something ourselves. I'll talk a little bit more about how that can actually put people into a situation where they're struggling if they take on too much of the emotion. They may end up in this place of empathic distress. And that really happens as a function of this other space, cognitive empathy. And cognitive empathy, again, what do we think about when we have that feeling in our own body? Do we think, oh, I'm experiencing a little bit of physiological arousal, tension in my shoulders, we're in front of somebody else who's suffering. Oh, this reminds me of a time in my own history where I've felt suffering myself, and this is unpleasant, so I'm going to get out of here, right? That is empathic distress. We're sort of taking on, we're absorbing, we're interpreting this physical experience as our own, and then we don't like it. Actually, when it is a moment of empathy and we're not the person suffering, it isn't our own, right? And this is an important part of the physiological sort of underpinning of a real empathic concern, or what some might call compassion response. It's not that I take on the emotion. I don't become sad myself. I simply feel something, and maybe I can interpret it as, oh, this is my kind of extra fuel to be of support here, to be the person who can help to connect in a meaningful way. Humans have evolved to provide each other with support. Frans de Waal has been watching primates for years and looking at what happens in the wake of conflict and harm, and what he's seen is that primates console one another. Right? We have this idea that they fight and their alpha wins, and then the ones that lose get sort of put off in the periphery and they die alone. That's not what happens. The other members of the tribe come and console the losers, and they bring them back in, and we're built with the same impulse. We want to help each other. That's an innate drive. So I show you this figure. This is from Tor Wager and his team, looking at the neural underpinnings of compassion, because it sort of breaks out the affective, the neural circuits that support this affective response. That is feeling something physiologically in your own body when you encounter somebody else who's suffering. And then this kind of judgment, interpretation, or inference set of circuits or pathways that help us make sense of what's happening and sort of form a feeling or a motivation around what to do. And in a funny way, both of those spaces are opportunities for cultivating empathy or bringing more empathy into your day in and day out lives. The affective space is a little more reflexive, happens really early in life. The cognitive empathy is something we learn, we become experts at around, I don't know, the developmental psychologists sometimes say as early as 18 months, sometimes as late as 4 years, kids really start to be able to put themselves into the shoes of another and take their perspective on the world and understand another person's motivation based on the context that they're in. So both of these are places where we have an opportunity to change or practice or engage with others in a way that can then bring empathy closer to our realm of possibility moment to moment. This is another team led by Tanya Singer. Same pattern of differentiation between systems, regions, and circuits that support this affective feeling, this something's happening in my body, this kind of understanding of what the situation is, what another person's expressing, and what my role might be in sort of supporting the possibility of compassion, or also referred to as empathic concern. And again, those states are much more closely hued to positivity resonance than perhaps distancing or separating oneself from another person who is showing some kind of suffering. So we found in a couple different ways that there are distinct neural pathways that really give rise to these different aspects of empathy. So let me talk for a minute about why empathy matters, why it's beneficial. First, I'll just say that it's the basic grammar of social life. And we've heard a little bit about emotions, these momentary states that help guide us towards opportunities and help guide us away from threats and risks and give us this capacity to function in the world. Well, empathy is that, but for social contexts. right? Empathy enables us to understand what other people are doing, why they're doing it, how we can connect with them, or when we might do better not necessarily engaging with them. That's all coming from empathy. If we're going to be socially competent, empathy lies at the root of that. People who are more empathetic, who exercise these more other-focused kind of systems and pathways and circuits in their brain tend to be more resilient. Resilience comes from not always falling prey to, I think, what Barb called kind of thinking outside of the current moment, right? When we're sort of possessed by inner reflections about ourselves and what happened earlier and what might happen later, and not noticing what's around us, not attuning to other people, we're more vulnerable to a host of illnesses and mental disturbances. When we're more empathetic, we're more satisfied in our relationships. Other people actually benefit more from our support when we express empathy. There are several studies within healthcare providers showing that when a healthcare provider is more empathetic, and this is real empathy, the authentic kind, not the practice bedside manner empathy, the patients that they serve are more satisfied with the experience, and they do better medically. Right? So there's evidence that being empathetic is a service to the people who we get to encounter and support in life. Same can be said for teachers. And then finally, when we empathize with other people's experiences, we're more finely attuned to the opportunities to serve moral goodness, right? We understand that people are in pain. We can think about and imagine ways that we can behave in the world or commit our energies or dedicate ourselves to helping others. This is the list could be longer. We could spend a week on the benefits of empathy, but this is just my succinct version of it. What are the things that really influence whether or not we empathize in a given situation? What we're here to talk about really today are these boundaries, social boundaries. This idea that we have groups. If we're in an in-group, we're more likely to feel empathy organically and spontaneously for somebody who we feel similar to. When we perceive another person as being very different from us, it arouses the potential that we see them as a threat. When we see someone as a threat, our safety networks kind of become depressed and we're less amenable to empathizing, right? When we're feeling under our threat ourselves, we're not as willing to empathize. And I think Rudy's going to share a little bit about how just merely interacting with other people across social boundaries can begin to sort of slowly chip away at that intuition that somehow we should be afraid of people who are different than us. Hierarchy, power differences, when we feel like we're better than another person, when we feel like another person deserves the suffering that they're experiencing. There's a classic study by Jean Dussetti at the University of Chicago where he showed images of suffering people in hospital settings and told participants in the study that they were either there because they got a blood transfusion, they were suffering the symptoms of AIDS infection. It was either from a blood transfusion or it was from intravenous drug use. And he looked at the brain responses to those two different pictures, and people were less empathetic to the people who were suffering because of intravenous drug use. So when we have kind of a judgment about another as somehow being less worthy or somehow being outside of our moral ideology, we spontaneously sort of suppress our empathic responses to them. But that's not always the most constructive thing to do, and often we overuse that impulse. That would be my suggestion. Excessive exposure. We all know that when we're constantly confronted with suffering, pain, discord, this can just be difficult. It can be overwhelming, and we can develop coping strategies that help us suppress that empathy, right? We become good at sort of shutting it off because we feel like we can't do anything about it. That's usually the problem. It's not that we don't like feeling something. It's we don't like feeling like we can't do anything about it. Daryl Cameron has really cataloged this phenomenon. It's called compassion collapse, right? When we're confronting suffering that we feel disempowered by because we are not able to help, instead of going, okay, we're not able to help, let's figure out, another channel of relating to the situation, a common response is to be like, okay, I'm not going to feel anything at all. I can't help, I'm not going to feel anything at all. This is one of the mistakes that I think we make. And then lastly, and I mentioned this on Friday night, we tend to, in the face of other suffering, engage in a cost-benefit analysis, right? And Batson and Eisenberg's work kind of alluded to this. Like, is this going to be expensive for me? Am I going to have to give a lot here? Am I going to be made to feel unpleasant? Am I going to be made to feel inadequate or ineffective? If so, I'm going to escape from this situation and not present myself with this opportunity to connect with someone in a meaningful way. So what can we do, or what are the things that we do to kind of help ourselves escape empathy? I actually had an experience just yesterday where I encountered some people who were in not a very happy place, really struggling. It wasn't here on campus, and it's very painful. It's very painful to see other people going through a really difficult time. And my thought internally was these people's lives are so complexly complicated and under duress that I don't have any capacity to solve the problem. And I felt that urge to go, okay, I'm going to leave, right? I'm just going to walk away. My other possibility is and I'm going to draw again from Richie and Lama Somo yesterday, I can just channel the fact that I care and be present as a force of social good for them. I'm not going to help them. I can't go and sort of resolve the issues with alcoholism or underprivilege in this moment that I can see going on for these people. But can I attune to the fact that it's there and add it into my calculus of what I do and what matters and maintain my status as a person of support? Yes, that's something I can do. And I feel like that lies at the heart of the Tonglen practice that we did with Lama Somo yesterday. Because I feel like, again, it bars against that place where we go, I can't do anything about it, so I'm not going to feel anything. When in fact, sometimes you can't do anything about it. But research suggests that just being there and just caring is really important to the overarching capacity to function well as a society. And it preserves our empathy when we, and when we have a chance to do something, we're more likely to if we don't stifle that empathy. Other ways that people stifle empathy is really by just suppressing the emotion, becoming less sensitive, deciding it just doesn't matter, and trying to always think about situations that are harmful in sort of positive, constructive ways, which is a great way to cope with difficult states, but we can overuse it in certain contexts. So what can we do in my last couple minutes? What can we do to foster sustained and expansive empathy? Richie talked about procedural and declarative memory or learning. Part of it is right here, this declarative memory or information that I'm trying to share with you. Look, empathy matters, empathy helps you. Empathy is a way for us to function well in society and serve our own well-being and the well-being of our community. So you can have that idea. But then there's procedural things, steps you have to take, right? Practices. Can you put your device away and look up? You know, Barb talked about the fact that we're always looking down and we don't even see people. The classic study of breakdown in empathies had to do with people feeling like they were in too much of a rush. Right, they were seminary students given a chance to help somebody, but they couldn't do it because they were so busy and so much in a hurry for another obligation. And so again, having more time built in and more space to actually connect with others and attune is really important. We practiced active listening. Channeling your inner hero, reminding yourself again that just being around somebody without offering them instrumental help is something that they perceive as a resource, right? We have this great study where people were looking up hills and asked how steep they thought the hill was. If they did it alone, they said it's a certain steepness. If they did it with a friend standing next to them, they thought it was less steep. Okay, so we consider one another a resource, even if we're not instrumentally helping. We need to remind ourselves that we are that for others. We are a resource for others, even when we're not helping. Another thing that can help with kind of making the choice to empathize is savoring the long-term benefits of engaging against the short-term benefits of escaping, right? That's part of this cost-benefit analysis. I can walk away, turn my head the other way, and avoid this, and the problem will go away. Or I can invest part of my energy in caring or helping if that's available to me, and that's going to lead to this long-term benefit, which is more powerful and more beneficial. I'll finish with a study that has shown that when we ask people to practice perspective taking, When we tell people, hey, read about another person's story, and then we look at levels of prejudice, and we look at levels of attitude, either positive or negative, towards someone from an out-group, that practice of perspective taking actually leads to less stereotypical attitudes, less prejudice, and more positive attitudes towards each other. So, all that said, I don't have time to share this with you, so I'm going to just let you look at it, and maybe we'll talk about it during our Q&A.